Happy evening once again, and I'd like to ask you to consider that our beloved brother has been trying to teach you a lesson in biblical history instead of dealing with the topic at hand, which is Allah and the Trinity. So I wonder what has happened to him during the time he's been sitting listening to me. He may have just veered off to some other part of the universe.
Thank you, Dr. Shorrosh. You certainly now have turned up the heat a little bit, so we're going to have to deal with that. That's fine. Without some heat, perhaps you cannot generate any light, and that's okay too. Now, Dr. Shorrosh, in fact, surprised me because he thought that I spoke off topic. I was addressing the topic. The topic was whether Allah or the Trinity is Allah or the Trinity based on true monotheism showing God's love, or is this paganism in a new form? So I did in fact address that topic. I showed how the Quran calls on people to worship Allah and Allah alone. I traced that back to the Old Testament where the same teaching was given. I showed that this was the teaching of Jesus. And I showed over time how that teaching was modified. As we go through the various Gospels, we see how Paul taught something different, and how the Gospels were influenced by the teachings of Paul, so that in John's Gospel, just as in Paul, we have Jesus who is the mediator between God and man, the one who is the agent of creation. And I've shown how, if we look at episode for episode on the Gospels, the story of Jesus has been reshaped, so that in Mark's Gospel, where Jesus is addressed as teacher, he comes to be addressed in Matthew and Luke as Lord. And I've shown how, whereas in Mark's and Matthew and Luke's Gospels, the first three, Jesus appears dependent on God, weak, praying for God to save him from the hour. In John's Gospel, he deliberately says, I'm not going to pray like that, because he came with a definite plan. So we have in John's Gospel a different Jesus, and we can see how over time Jesus has been, the conception of him has been modified. Just like a snowball, the more you roll it around, the bigger it gets. In fact, Jesus had become bigger over time as we trace his image through the Gospels, until finally at the Council of Nicaea in the year 325, he comes to be declared very God of very God. And in the Quran, what we have then is the call for Christians not to reject Jesus, but to come to a true understanding of Jesus. This is why the Quran says, وَلْيَحْكُمْ أَهْلُ الْإِنْجِيلِ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ. Let the people of the gospel judge by what God has revealed therein. So the Quran is calling Christians to go back over the Gospels, look carefully at the sayings of Jesus, and try to see which were the earlier forms of these sayings. Did he pray like in the Synoptic Gospels, or did he not pray like the Gospel according to John said regarding his intention for God to save him from the cross?